Welcome to Asphalt Talk, a podcast by and for asphalt professionals. Join our expert hosts as they tackle real industry issues to pave a smoother way for asphalt suppliers and producers. This podcast is sponsored by MAPA, the Missouri Asphalt Pavement Association. Founded to promote quality and accountability, MAPA has been serving the asphalt producers of Missouri since 1990. And now a public service announcement from our sponsor, May Create Design. Google Translate doesn't work for web designer to paving company translations. You say hot mix and it thinks you're talking about the latest snack craze. Wouldn't it be nice to work with a designer who knows the difference between binders and bitumen? Work with folks who have been speaking your language for the past 17 years. Visit maycreate.com. That's M-A-Y-E create.com. Because if you think your website sucks, so does everyone else.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Asphalt Talk. I'm your host, Dale Williams with Missouri Asphalt Pavement Association. Today, we're sitting down with Eric Schroeter, the new Deputy Director and Chief Engineer at MoDOT. Eric, it's great to have you back on the podcast today. I look forward to our discussion about your role as the new Deputy Director and Chief Engineer. Before we dive into that, let's take a little bit of time to learn a little bit about yourself. How long have you been with MoDOT, and what roles have you held before stepping into this position?
Yes, thanks so much for having me on. Really appreciate that. So yeah, my time at MoDOT's in over 30 years, and started out in construction and in a project office in Sedalia was actually where I started the department. And really that's kind of what really brought me to the department. I've done construction work outside, and that brought me here, and that's been a great foundation for my career. And then from construction, then moved to somewhat the operations and what was in District 5, the central part of the state. Overseeing a lot of maintenance and construction operations there. Eventually, I was the assistant district engineer, and then came to central office after about 20 years out in the district. So that gave me a great footing on what really happens across the department of working in the district with crews and with projects right on the ground. And in central office, I've spent some time in the design division and eventually becoming the assistant chief engineer before taking on this role as the chief engineer and deputy director.
What's been your favorite role or project you've worked on during your career at MoDOT?
You know, that's a great question because there's been a lot. You know, one of the things I really enjoy here is that this is an opportunity to make a difference. You know, we see tangible results of work accomplished, whether it's through our projects that make a big difference or through our maintenance operations, or even at this time of year where we're responding to disasters and asked to get roads cleared and back open, things like that. So it's being able to take the pride in getting things done. You know, I look back over my career and some of the ones that kind of have come full circle is early in my career, I believe it was in 94, I did a rehab project on the Rocheport Bridge. And at that time, we were talking about that rehab and paint job lasting another 30 years. And then last year, we celebrated blowing that up and opening up a brand new bridge in that spot. So it's a chance to come kind of full circle to see that come around. So there's been a lot of them I've been involved with. But it's been able to make a difference for Missouri. You know, it's things I can tell my family and my kids that, hey, we worked on that, and to be proud of the work we do.
Yeah, I think that is really a neat aspect. And, you know, as I start to realize, you know, we're turning into being some of the older guys in the industry, seeing these things come full circle is pretty amazing.
And that's the exciting thing, is to be able to help people understand, look, you can really make a career here and make a difference, do work that's meaningful, still raise your families like you and I have, and be contributors to making Missouri a better place.
Yeah. And, you know, we're really in a really neat time in history with all the funding that's out there, and, you know, rebuilding of I-70, you know, it's a once in a generation thing, and to be part of that is pretty incredible.
Right. It's a cool project to be associated with.
Yeah. So who has been a key mentor or influence in your career?
You know, I look back at, and that's, you know, as we talk being here for a while and you get to these points in your career, I look back to some of those early people that I associate with in the project office. And not all of them were engineers, but, you know, some of those long-term who were construction inspectors who built a whole career doing that, that really showed you the importance of the work, how to get along, how to work with a contractor to, you know, cooperatively. It was us against the project, right? It was making it happen, of how all those communications could work best. I also look at some of the contractors that I've dealt with over that time too. A lot of them had their name on the door of the truck at that time, and it was their family pride and being able to work with them to deliver those projects. But also look to one of the key ones I'd say was a man named Roger Schwartz, who was the district engineer at District 5, Central District, at the time he retired. And he really showed us that he trusted in us and put a lot of faith in us and challenged us to do good work and to do better and to better ourselves. And having that faith in somebody that would put it in a younger person, that meant a lot for me. That he gave us some significant roles to take on, and that really developed me a lot. So I really appreciate the influence that he had on my career.
So what do you enjoy doing outside of work? Got any hobbies or interests?
Right. So, have all my children are out of the house now. So at one time, like a lot of folks, it was going to ball games and Boy Scout events and all those things. But now my wife and I spend a lot of time gardening. Also married into a farming operation that my wife's family operates over by High Point, Missouri. So her mother still lives on the family farm. We assist her out there in kind of a cow-calf operation. So those really enjoy my time outside with outdoor events, and also gardening and woodworking, I'd say, are two of my prime passions.
Well, certainly working with cattle can help you working with some of the difficult things in with dealing with the public sometimes.
Yeah, there's nothing like being humbled by a giant beast that manages to keep getting out when you've tried to do your best to keep them in. So it can be a humbling event. I'll say that.
That's for sure. My wife's family raises cattle, and helping her dad a few times, I learned a few new words whenever we spent some time working the cattle. So
yeah, I've had a few neighbors mention that at times it looks like I was losing my religion out there. So yeah, I've had some of those moments too.
now that you've stepped into this leadership role, what is your vision for MoDOT? Where do you see the department heading in the next 5 to 10 years?
I think one of the things we talked about, it's really an exciting time with the level of funding. We're taking on major projects that are making a long-term investment in Missouri and a difference. So it's a chance to develop that next generation. Who's replacing you and I, to help them see this as a field worthy of a career. You can raise a family. You can make a difference for Missouri. But I also think it's that great time that the vision I see is us working together with all of our partners. We need each other between the contracting and consulting industries and everybody here at the department, working together to deliver these projects and the results for Missouri. I think that's the part of the vision that I'm really most excited about. Is we have the funding, which is great. Now the challenge is delivering, and that delivery happens by working together. We're much better when we work together. We're not always going to agree. I don't always agree with everybody in my own family, let alone, but the ability to have conversations, to talk and plan this out and to tackle it together. I think that's part of the reason Missouri is recognized as a great place to do work, is that we focus on doing the work as opposed to battling it out between each other. And I want to keep that tradition going and make sure that that's the legacy I leave behind, is we do this cooperatively, we work together, we need each other. And that's what I think people really expect out of us in Missouri, is to do the work together and make it happen.
I think that's a great point, Eric. I talk to my counterparts, across the country, and I appreciate, the dialogue and the relationship we have. We're able to meet quarterly, or just meet at times when challenges arise. And, that isn't the same across the country. And I think, working together, and I love your statement, it's us against the project. It's not us against each other. And I just,
I talk with my counterparts too. And unfortunately, I think, not anything against lawyers, but I think some industries spend too much time on paying lawyers to battle stuff out, when we just need to sit down and get ourselves focused on what the result is we're trying to get and work this out together. We're much better off for that. And I think that history and legacy is shown in Missouri of why it's a good place to do work.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So what are your top priorities in your new position?
There's always a couple of them that come to mind. And I think the first one I'd say is safety. This is not only for your company's workers, this is for my crews, and this is for the public as well. When we look at fatalities that occurred in work zones, those are the ones that terrify me, where we and you both have people, boots on the ground, that are exposed to traffic. We talk about making this a great place to work as a career, but to be a great place to work, you gotta be able to do it safely and expect to go home in that same condition. So my first part is keeping our focus on that we got to keep doing all we can with distracted and impaired drivers to make sure that we're doing the work and our folks can do the work as safely as possible. But I think the second thing is, delivering the projects. It's great that we've done all the work. Industry has done a tremendous amount of work in getting funding and getting trust built back. Now we have the funding. Now we got to deliver. That's the second part of it. We got a great track record of that. You go back, we just shared, I think, our 10-year report. Over 4,000 projects done in that 10-year period, and 93% are on time and under budget. That's a great track record that you won't find anywhere else in the States. And that's a tribute to the companies that you represent and for our people as well, working together. So it's still that focus of delivering on the project. And then I think the other thing is, from our operations side, is making sure we're working on those customer concerns, that we truly are here to provide service for Missouri. There's always concerns that we need to be working on. There's things they want us to do, and that's why they have us. So we got to keep focus on that we're delivering on that customer service part.
Yeah, I like that your safety is priority, because I mean, with the distracted driving these days,
it's an epidemic, and and it's not just here in Missouri. It's, as you talk with your counterparts across the nation, that's one of the things I think holds people back from getting in this industry, is that moms are not that inclined to encourage their family members to join this industry when they see it as a dangerous thing. And we need to make sure that we're not showing it as a dangerous thing. We got to do this safely as we can.
Yeah, absolutely. I think about it, I've got a son that's studying civil engineering right now, and I'm driving down the road and I think back to my days standing on the shoulder, and that was a different time 30 years ago, before action of phones and everything.
Yeah, when I started, safety vests weren't a requirement, and
hard to believe.
It's hard to believe, but I remember, distinctly standing out there on the edge of the road doing survey work, and said, "Watch for cars," is all they told you,
Yeah. Now they're buzzing by at 80 miles an hour looking at a phone, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's a whole different game.
Really scary. We talked a little bit about I-70, and you guys have been working on that project. How do you see, like a project that magnitude reshaping Missouri's infrastructure?
I think it's one of those. So we have a whole generation that has never known a highway system without interstates. So you got to go back to our parents or back to find a generation that moved things around the country with just the state highway system, not having the major interstates that linked cities and 4 lanes and all the things that the interstates brought. So now our chance is to upgrade that system to make it function even better across Missouri, and demonstrate, our importance in that transportation world. Missouri's got a great advantage just by our natural location of being in the middle of everything. So by us investing in that and able to deliver on that investment of improving the interstate system, that sends a lot of signals to a lot of places that Missouri is serious about our role in transportation. We're serious about all the industries that work here, our agriculture, and all the things that need to move products to the world. We want to make sure we're supporting that. But I think our other part is that, we take this to the next generation. So the generation that invested in the interstates, that saw that vision, well, now it's time to reinvest in that, to make sure that we keep that commitment, that transportation is that important to our economy and to everybody. But now it's also our chance to do this and show that it can be done. Right. So one of the things I say is, when the interstate was built, a lot of it went through green fields and you didn't have traffic on it. Well, now we're doing open heart surgery and we can't kill the patient. So we got, anywhere from 100,000 to 40,000 vehicles, depending on which stretch you're on. And we're going to do this while we keep all that traffic moving. So it's a little different game, but I think we're up to it. I think the industry has really shown the innovation and the ability to come up with solutions. So this is our chance to really shine, I think, as an industry, to show what we can do when the funds are available.
Yeah, I think about this transformational project, I-70, I always think of, our road system as really a utility. And
Yeah.
I don't think most people, I think most people just take for granted, oh, the roads have always been there and they'll always be there. But, we've got an aging infrastructure and, we've got to maintain what we have. And I think when you start talking to people, I always like to ask people, we talk about raising the motor fuel user fee, so how much do you think you pay on average a year to use the road system? And most of them, they're off by a magnitude of 10 to 20 times. And,
Oh yeah. They're
you
way overestimate.
you're using all these roads for investment of $300 to $400 a year is pretty incredible. So that's one of the things I always like to share with people as we talk about investing in infrastructure. Um, so how do you see the partnership between MoDOT and the contracting industry evolving in the future?
Well, think I talked a little bit about this earlier, but this is where I see, in my eyes, that partnership is really where we are able to talk through issues. We're not always going to agree eye to eye on everything, but we want to make sure we're airing them all out and that all sides are getting heard and that we're really focused on delivering. But also, we got to understand the pressures that are on both sides. One that we share right now is everybody has a workforce pressure, whether it's a generational change. There's not so many gray-haired superintendents out there as there used to be. A lot of them have finally hung up their boots. So that shared one there and working on a solution of how do we draw people to this industry. But then we also have individual ones unique to our business. We need to understand that. And that's where having that conversation and talking with each other is where we best make that happen, is doing this truly as a true partnership that focuses on delivering. And also, how do we schedule that out, right? Because we know there's capacities. There's only so much work you can get done in a year in Missouri. Mother Nature, this year winter showed up and winter stayed for a while. So making sure we're doing that planning with all those minds and part of the conversation of what can we get done, what's realistic, what time schedules really work, and also trying to balance that out, realizing there's only so many resources that support all that.
Yeah. Yeah. Mother Nature always makes our world interesting.
Yeah.
We have 80 degrees today as we're recording this. And I think we talked earlier before we started recording, have chance of snow tomorrow night. So,
yeah. So, it's interesting times of everybody's, are we ready to turn on the plant yet or not? And then next thing you know, there's snow on your stockpiles. You're like, well, maybe not today.
yeah, that's for sure. So what's the biggest challenge MoDOT is facing right now and how are you working to address it?
I gave you a couple that go in that. We already talked a little bit about workforce. We're seeing that just like everybody else. There's a generational change, but also just the pressures in the economy of finding people and training them into tech fields to keep on bringing in that next group. But it's also, I think, some of the things we're seeing is how do you deliver just the sheer volume of work we got? We're working on the largest STIP program ever in our history, which is great. We're putting out about, on average, we have to do about $150 million in projects a month through the letting system. Well, that's great, but we still have the same number of people we had when we were doing about 700 million a month or a year. So that turned into about 70 million lettings. So they've about doubled in size. So how do you do this with the size of workforce we have? And also that realizing that applies to contractors as well. You can't just snap your fingers and have another crew staffed up and ready to roll, because you can bid on more stuff. It all takes time and scheduling. So those are all challenges that are out there. I don't say any of them are insurmountable, but they do take our attention and time to work on.
Yeah, they do. And, I was telling somebody the other day, looking back 4 or 5 years ago when the program was pretty bleak, the problems we're working on today these are better problems to work on than what we were facing.
Yeah, I'd much rather be getting together and talking about how do we schedule this out so that we can deal with the capacity, realizing here's all the projects we have and we can't bid them all at once. You can't do them all at once. What's that schedule look like? As opposed to, boy, we wish we had some money to do some of these. Yeah. It's a much better conversation to have, but it's still challenging.
It is. And the workforce one, I think, as the generations change, I think you look at our generation or even the generation before, people were making careers at one organization. And now, I don't know how many average companies the newer generations will work for, but I think it's going to be significantly more than what you or I or our parents' generation did.
It's definitely different. We're all trying to learn that a little bit.
Yeah. So if you could give yourself a piece of advice, or I'm sorry, if you could give one piece of advice to someone starting out in the transportation or construction industry, what would it be?
The thing I'd tell them is this is a field that really has a wide range of opportunities. That somebody coming into this field, you can make a career of this, but it's got a wide range from whether or not you want to be in field operations or in some of the office operations or bidding and estimating. Uh, we have a lot of opportunities, and part of it is hard to explain to people. They don't always see behind the scenes of all this. So I'd encourage a young person to get in with a company and see all the things that it takes to make it happen, and realize, boy, there's a lot of things here where different skills bring the best to us, and that there's a great opportunity here in transportation.
Yeah, like your point earlier talking about, the first job you worked on being the Roachport Bridge. When I started my career at MoDOT, I was up in District 2, I guess, which would be part of Northeast Missouri now in Macon, and worked on a job that was a blue hole from the Missouri River up there, put an alignment around it. And, just to see that still in service today is, it's kind of a neat thing to say you were part of.
Yeah.
And I know my kids, every once in a while, they kind of get tired of me saying, "Oh," when I point out something I worked on, they're like, "Yeah, Dad, we know."
I've gotten that too.
Yeah. So any final thoughts or messages you'd like to share with our listeners?
Yeah, I think the big thing is, as you and I have talked, is I want to make sure we keep the legacy of partnership going, that we're able to have conversations with each other, that when people become frustrated or don't understand, pick up the phone, give us a call. I really want to be able to sit down with people and talk about what's going on. And I think that's what brings us the best results. It's what also helps us develop the best plan going forward, is making sure we're getting everybody's input and insight into it, because none of us are experts in everything, right? So we got to make sure we're tapping everybody to get that part of the plan together, and really build on that legacy of a partnership.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Eric. I tell you, I think when we communicate, we can usually solve any problem. And then sometimes we just have to agree to disagree, but I do think we can work through most things.
But the vast majority, we can at least come to some common ground and keep on going.
Well, Eric, I appreciate the conversation today, and I'd like to say thank you for listening to Asphalt Talk, the podcast by and for asphalt professionals. If you've enjoyed listening and learned something, please leave us a review. Your review will help us connect with other professionals like yourself so we can keep this conversation going.
1992 called, they want their website back. Stop apologizing for your crappy site and stop working with that company who thinks hot mix is the latest snack craze. Work with folks who have been speaking your language for the past 17 years. And get a website that's not a gigantic pain in the you-know-what to build. Visit mayecreate.com, that's M-A-Y-E create.com, for a free consultation and quote. Because if you think your website sucks, so does everyone else.